everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in person for the, I think the 20th iteration of the Aperture PhotoBook Club, but only our second in-person gathering. Yeah, everyone fill on in. I'm Sarah Meister. I'm the executive director of Aperture, and I am thrilled to be here for this gathering with the legendary Coreen Simpson and three other. So, the Aperture PhotoBook Club was first imagined as a space where we could talk about photo books as objects and the ideas and images they contain. This is an important part of Aperture's history. We've been around for 73 years as a nonprofit publisher, and this is, I should count, but with over 1,000 books that we've published to date, and over 260 issues of our quarterly magazine, for which Michael Famighetti, editor-in-chief of all of Aperture, is also editor-in-chief of the magazine. So welcome, Michael. Glad to have you here. And his specific expertise in this is that he is the editor of this book. So in a minute, I'll turn it to Michael to ask him to describe it. But before I do that, the Photo Book Club is an opportunity to think about the substance and the content with the brilliant people who all play a role in making these books come into existence. So, of course, that includes the artists, but I'm also delighted that we're joined by Iesha Coppin-Forde, who is an assistant editor at Aperture and worked on this book in many ways that you will hear about soon, and with Adam Turnbull of Pacific, who with Elizabeth Karp, Elizabeth Karp Evans designed this wonderful book. So we have a brilliant lineup and a few administrative things to start. One is that my colleague, Brianna Reddick, over there, is holding little note cards and pens. And while when we do an online version of the Photo Book Club, people submit their questions online, what we would love is if you have questions that you would like for any of our esteemed panelists to address, note them on a little card, hand them to Brianna, and she will hand them to me, and we will go through them. If you want to put your name on it, fantastic, and if you don't, that's also okay. I also should note that there are a few copies of this book around on the chairs. They are there not to take, sorry. If you want one, we hope, if you want one, we hope you might buy one at the end of the evening, and Coreen has generously agreed to sign books. But if you want to look at it, share it with a neighbor, ask a question pertaining to the book itself, they're there for you to peruse and enjoy throughout the evening. So please do that. And without further ado, I thought I would turn it over to Michael to say a few words about Coreen in this book and kind of how it got started.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for being here. I want to just first acknowledge that this book is the second volume of Aperture's Vision and Justice series that is edited by Sarah Lewis, Lee Rayford, and Deborah Willis. And we are very honored to have been working with Sarah Lewis on the Vision and Justice project since we did an issue of the magazine in 2016. And the book series kind of grew out of that project, or as an extension of it. Coreen, it's been such an amazing journey to make this book with you. We've been dreaming of this book for a long time now, and it's just so, we're so excited by how it's come to fruition. The book covers, well, for all of you, I'm sure many of you know Coreen, and you know that she's done it all. And anytime anybody asks me to describe Coreen, it's a paragraph, because she contains multitudes. And so the book really encompasses so many facets of Coreen's creative output over the years, starting as a writer, becoming a photographer, becoming a jewelry designer, seeing the links between photography and jewelry design, And we wanted, with Sarah Lewis, Deb Willis, and Lee Rayford, we wanted to honor that capaciousness to Coreen's vision and her work over the last 5 decades. So the book really covers the grand scope of what Coreen has done so brilliantly over many years. And it's a photo book, but it's also a book of stories, a book of essays, and a book that includes an amazing interview that Deb Willis did with Coreen. So there's many essays in here, but from Rue Hockley at the Whitney to Doreen St. Felix at the New Yorker to Ewal Orezcu, to Bridget Cooks, to Sarah Lewis, to Salamisha Tillett, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but you can see the table of contents. But we really wanted to, part of the role of the Vision and Justice series is to, to give due and proper acknowledgement to bodies of work and photographers that just haven't been sufficiently published or exhibited or historicized or written about. So text was really key here. So there are many brilliant essays in the book. Doreen St. Felix's essay was recently republished on the New Yorker's website. You can read it there. So it's great that there's so many points of entry into the project. I think I should stop there. Yeah.
So I thought what we all really want to know is, how does it feel, Coreen, to be holding your first book? Like, tell us about the process, but really just tell it. Why don't we start by, how does it feel?
Well, I could.
Yeah, we. Oh,
Maybe my. Okay. It feels great. It's a real blessing to have this book published. It's surreal, actually, and the press that we've gotten since this book has come out is, amazing to me. It's an avalanche of riches, let's say. It's just wonderful, and I'm so glad that I have a book of my work. And with all the people that wrote about it, the essayists, just fabulous. So I'm thrilled.
good.
Yeah.
We are too. Maybe you'd also go on and just tell us a little bit about your thoughts about photography, and did working on this project change that at all? Thinking about how you've engaged with photography over the years?
I think it intensified my interest in photography, because now I'm thinking, what am I going to do next? What is the next adventure going to be? Photography never bored me. My attention span was very short for most things. And when I picked up the camera, I just felt that, oh, this is great. I'm not bored with this. I can get out, I can meet people, I can have my adventures, because that's what photography is about. It's like a passport. The camera is like a passport. So I was able over the years to just do practically anything I wanted to do. And especially when I had credentials, press credentials, I was able to go to all the different events, and at churches and parties. I met so many fabulous people. James Baldwin comes to mind. You know, isn't that great to meet a person like that? I think when I met him, I really didn't know how important a person he was. I was at a party for the woman that headed the Romare Bearden Foundation. Joan Sandler gave a party in her apartment, and there he was. But I knew he was important, but I didn't know much about him, because I was a young photographer and I really didn't know what was going on really at the time. In fact, I didn't even know how to use a flash. And after I struggled in the darkroom to print this photograph of him, Romare Bearden, his Mrs. Bearden, his wife, and who else was in that picture? It was about 4 different artists. I realized, girl, you better take some tests. You better get a flash unit. This is terrible. But I was just learning, and I said, oh God, this is awful. I could never publish this. Although later on, I learned a lot of darkroom techniques and learned how to push the photograph, use highly resolution paper, whatever, high numbered paper.
Contrast.
Contrast paper, exactly. Thanks, Sarah. You were in the dark room with me.
I am a photo nerd. I started
You're a
in the
photo
dark.
nerd. So I learned how to do it, but I said, oh, I'm not going to put myself through this. And actually, any photographers here, you would know what I'm talking about. I studied The Zone System by Ansel Adams. Remember, he had a book called The Zone System, and someone gave me the book. And I said, what is this about? I read it, but I did not really fully understand what he was talking about until I started taking photographs more often. And then I realized, oh, that's what Ansel Adams meant. So I think you learn by doing. Okay.
Some people learn by doing, other people learn by looking. And Iesha, maybe we'll bring you into it. I think people would be really interested to hear, well, first of all, when you first met Coreen, and also kind of what you did with respect to this book, because I don't think people know all of the work that goes into it.
So I first met Coreen actually by pitching myself to work on this project, funny enough, through another Aperture title, flipping through at my desk in the office called Fashion Photography, the story in 180 photographs. And I remember coming across an image of Helene, I believe, from her B-Boy and Hip Hop series at the Roxy Club in 1985, and wanted to know, why don't we have a book by this artist? And I soon found out that this book would be coming out of her monograph with the Vision and Justice series. And I guess the rest is history. I'm sitting here today. So from that, sorry, what was the?
Just hold the microphone close so we can hear you, because you can express with your other hand.
Oh, sorry.
But I want to make sure everyone hears you. So talk a little bit about what you did with the book. So you knew you wanted to work on it. We were very happy you wanted to work on it, but a little bit about what it was like.
So first off, I'm the assistant editor. So a lot of my job often comes off as a project manager. So I kind of handle the logistics and the technical sides of the book process. That includes a lot of kind of art organization. And in doing so, this is kind of where I came in on this project. I kind of at times felt like an archivist more than an editor of sorts, having to organize, over a half century of photographs. So that was definitely very challenging in the process. But in doing so, Coreen and I spent so much time together. I mean, weeks into months of kind of going through her archive. And I know a lot of the times when we approach an artist or for a book project, we'll go to, say, their representation, their gallery, or their studio, and work with their studio manager to receive some of these files. In this case, Coreen didn't have that. So we were kind of starting from scratch here. So
Will you maybe talk about Jabrea Patterson West and how you all work together to sort of build this history?
Yes, of course. So Jabrea Patterson West, she was the research assistant on this project. And she really did lay laid the foundation for us as editors to kind of know what was in Coreen's archive, what she documented, the different decades, where she was, and kind of helped us kind of gather our thoughts around the initial image edit, which then became what we call the plate section in the books, the majority of images that you see. From there, we had to kind of go in and retrieve these files from her. So rather than having digital files, this was actual work. Anything from negatives to 35 milliliter slides needed to be scanned. So you can imagine there was a lot of production that had to happen. With our amazing production team that was with us every step of the way, we can't thank them enough for everything that they did to make this book come to be. But yeah, it was a lot of work, but I say with every challenge, there's a reward, and being able to be with the artist at that level, to hear these personal stories of where she was, to photograph Muhammad Ali or Toni Morrison was extremely special. And I think a moment that I will always be ingrained in my mind was trying to find an image of her reviewing the contact sheets in the darkroom. And this image was taken by her mentor, Walter Johnson. And I think we scoured the entire apartment to look for this one image, and we just could not find it. And for some reason, we're like, okay, let's regroup and settle down. And I randomly, I think, moved my arm on a folder, and I was like, let me look through here. And there it was. And it was such an emotional moment to have. And I said, Coreen, this book was meant to be. It was like an act of God. So, yeah.
Wow.
Iesha, was there a favorite story that Coreen shared with you that you want to prompt her to tell us now?
Oh, there were so many. Oh my god.
Stories.
She does. Yeah, we'll get to some of those. Michael, maybe you talk for a minute, because Adam and Elizabeth did such an incredible job thinking of the design for this book. But do you want to talk about how we chose Adam and Elizabeth, and then we can ask Adam on their behalf to?
Sure. Well,
Oh, sorry.
I think okay. I'm sure many of you in this room have seen the brilliant work of Pacific, the name of the company that Adam and Elizabeth have invented. They do brilliant design work for many cultural institutions, and we had worked with Adam and Elizabeth on a book series, the Aperture Ideas series, which is a book series dedicated to writings by photographers. So when we were thinking about this book, we just immediately thought that Adam and Elizabeth would bring, a really fresh vision and take to the work. And like Iesha was saying, there's a lot of work that we had to go through to get, the edit in shape, but also because there's so many varieties or categories of work, thinking about structure too, we knew would be really important. And we knew that Adam and Elizabeth could help us figure out the kind of right architecture for the book.
So yeah, why don't you, if you hold this, I'll turn to whatever it is you're talking about that you want to highlight.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just firstly start saying when I first met Coreen, Michael said, Adam and Elizabeth are going to be designing your book. Coreen said, design the hell out of it. So we did.
That was the brief.
And so I guess firstly, I might start with the material that we're looking at on the cover. When we were, after a few conversations with Michael and Coreen and Iesha, we learned a lot about Coreen's life and her work with jewelry design. And that was something that we wanted to kind of reference. So we were thinking about like jewelry packaging. So we wanted this to really feel like an object. So we're using a sort of synthetic leather material on the cover, and we used a really kind of thick board. So there's a lot of structure to the publication. And so it really feels like an object when you hold it. It's like a subtle, simple thing, but it's a very, kind of beautiful idea that we really loved. Secondly, the image on the cover, this was, after going through our process, this was the first image that we thought would it just felt like so iconic as a cover image. We looked at some others. We tried to put David Hammond's on the cover at one point, but we just kept coming back to this particular image. It's just so beautiful and so strong. Some other things, some other details that we talked a lot about with everyone in the series editors as well, was the sequencing of the publication, where we really liked opening the book with the text, with the introduction text, and then there's also the first text that kind of introduces Coreen and her work, and then at the back of the book are all of the essays, and the conversation with Deb. So in between that, we have all of the photography in between the text, and it was really important for us, like the more that we kind of dive into Coreen's work, to experience all of that work in one sequence. We spent a lot of time with everyone kind of working through the layout and the sequencing to create a rhythm and really kind of dive into Coreen's work. It's really incredible when you really kind of understand her life, which is just so amazing. So many incredible people. I think the Baldwin image that you're talking about is just so powerful and so strong, and he's like so casual in it. It's such an incredible image, and there's every other page is an image like that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's almost like it does feel like a life, but it's a life that's sort of structured into these chapters. So maybe, Michael, if you and Coreen would talk about, because it's not exactly chronological, and there's a fashion section, but of course everybody's so fashionable, and there's a nightlife, but like nightlife, there's celebrity, but like, wow, everybody on some, you've encountered a lot of famous people. So maybe if you'd talk a little bit about how you approached distilling a life in photography to a book, I think people would find that interesting.
You want to start? Well, Coreen had categories that she had organized her work in, so that kind of gave us the blueprint. But I think some of the categories are, like you were saying, Sarah, they're not totally hard and fast. Like certain pictures could probably go in one category or the other, but then there's a section that's fashion, but it's like fashion with a capital F maybe, as opposed to street style, or and those are pictures that you actually took during Fashion Week in Paris or New York. And actually, to come back to stories, one of my favorite stories of Coreen's is working at Paris Fashion Week in the 1980s, I believe, and working with Bill Cunningham. And your relationship with Bill Cunningham, who we all know was the great street photographer for the New York Times, street style photographer for the New York Times. But maybe you want to talk about that story?
I think, is this working? Mm-hmm. Okay. I think I told you the story of covering the collections, and I would go home every night after seeing about 4 or 5 shows with a headache because it was so hard. First of all, there was hardly any women there. It was mostly men, and the men were very aggressive, and they were not kind. And if you're a newbie, they weren't accepting you. And the only person I really knew at the runway was Bill Cunningham. And he saw me struggling so hard. And I was like 4 people down, so there was always heads in my shots. And it was just annoying. And one day he reached out over all the photographers, reached his arm out to me, pulled me to the runway, and I had no problem after that, because the great one had anointed me. We were friends, you know? And that was really kind of him. Bill Cunningham was one of the sweetest, kindest photographers and people that I ever met. And that really changed for me, because I used to get a headache. I really did after every show, although the fashions were so fabulous that if you're depressed and you see a great fashion show, it's like great art. But they don't do it like they used to when I was at the runway. I could feel the fabric as the model walked down the runway. I could literally take my hand and touch the fabric. Naomi Campbell, all those people, so fabulous. It would lift my spirits. But fighting with the other photographers was hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a little bit, you have 2 sections of the book. One chapter is artists, and I think for those of us in the room, artists and celebrities are sort of synonymous. I look through the artist section, and then I look through the celebrity portrait section, and I think to myself, what's the difference? But I would be curious.
Well, there's a difference.
So tell me, what is the difference?
The difference is that the artists were more my colleagues, because I was working at the Studio Museum in Harlem, the original museum. And so I got to meet even some of the artists are here today. I'm so happy they're here. Jessica Hagedorn, raise your hand. I know Jessica, and Nina Kuo, and so many of the other artists that I met years ago are here today. But celebrity portraits were really taken at events. They didn't sit for me, unless I was assigned to do a portrait of them. But the artists, I could spend time with them, and they sat for me. So it was an actual sitting. A sitting is different than grabbing a photograph at an event. So the Diana Ross photographs, for example, the 2 that are in the book, that was just at an event, and I just happened to capture that moment. So both of them are fun. I like either style, just capturing the moment or making the moment happen.
I love it. And while we're on the subject, would you, speaking of Iman, Rosa Parks, these are all people who have worn your Black Cameo, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't spend a moment talking about your career as a jewelry designer, and that piece in particular that was so many famous people, celebrities and artists and others.
Rihanna, don't forget her.
Oh, sorry. Riri, we go way back.
Thrill.
Yeah.
That was a thrill.
Well, tell us about it.
I'm a big Rihanna fan.
How did that happen?
Her people called me and said, her people, because I didn't speak to Rihanna ever directly, But her staff called me one day and said, "Are you the woman that does the Black Cameo? Because Rihanna has a ring, and we want to make sure that we give you the credit." And I was like, "Oh, yes, I'm the woman." So that's how, she just purchased it from some other vendor or something, I guess. But anyway, what was the question again?
I'm just interested in the Black Cameo, how you came to create it, maybe, and then who else you enjoy seeing wearing it.
Well, it's always mind-blowing to see somebody wear my jewelry. That gives me such a big thrill. I can't explain it, but it just, especially when I first started. But I made the Black Cameo, which is a pendant, this is a cameo for people. Everyone doesn't understand what a cameo is. It's a relief photo, not a photograph, but a sculptural relief of a woman. And when I was selling my jewelry, one of the senior editors of a magazine asked me, could I make a cameo? I said, I don't make cameos. See how life is? And now I make a lot of cameos, but I said to her, I don't make cameos. I don't do that. I said, but maybe I can find one. What do you, she said, I want it to be a Black woman because I'm a Black woman and I love the cameos, but I don't feel it represents me. So I looked and I looked. I went into the Diamond District. I went all over. Of course, there were cameos from Europe. It's not like I invented the cameo, but I decided to bring the cameo back and make it more modern and make it accessible to women of color. So I went to a jewelry factory in Rhode Island that Ken Kelleber's house gallery, her father, Coreen Jennings' father was a master jewelry designer, and did you know that? He was a master. In fact, she has a gallery named after her father, Wilma Jennings, but he was a jewelry designer at a factory in Rhode Island called Imperial Pearl. So she said, go see my dad. So I went to see him. What a fabulous gentleman he was. Oh my goodness, handsome, beautiful, with this white, beautiful hair. He was gorgeous. And he brought me into the president of the company. And I told the gentleman, I said, I brought my portfolio because I had been, my jewelry was in a lot of different magazines, a lot of, I had a portfolio. And I showed it to him and I said, I have an idea, but I don't know how to execute it. And I explained to him, and he said, well, this is what you do. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I wrote down everything he said. He said, once you do that, bring me the design and I will produce it for you. And you can make as many as you want. Because usually when you produce a piece of jewelry, it has to be like 1,000 pieces or something like that. He said, we won't hold you to an amount. Just bring me the design. So that's what I did after working with my model maker, who's a fabulous model maker. Can't think of his name right now, so many years ago. Agundape Fayomi. I gave him a photograph that I took of a Black woman who was very beautiful. And I said, I want it to look similar to this, but change this, change that. So that's how it came about.
That's awesome. And maybe Iesha, Michael, Adam, this is for any of you, but this is a book about photography, and yet there's obviously so much more, including jewelry, that factors into it. How did you approach integrating these things in the book? And actually, you can all answer in different ways.
Well, it's funny. Adam and I were just talking about how I think one of the questions we had was how to integrate text and image, because we have all this great writing that contextualizes the work and includes a lot of these great stories that Coreen has. And, at one point we were like, okay, should we have the text kind of come with each section, so it's kind of integrated throughout. And then, as Adam was describing, we decided just to kind of separate them to some degree, where we had this essay in the front that kind of gives an overview, and then the more specific kind of topic-focused essays are in the back, and thought about structuring it that way. So you could have this uninterrupted flow of pictures as well. But actually, one question I had for Coreen was, you're always in the right place at the right time, like in all of, and I love, your pictures from the B-Boys series. You set up an improvised studio at the Roxy in 1985, And I imagine that wasn't easy to do and to convince somebody to let you do that. And I love your story about, I remember one time we were going through pictures with Coreen and there was a picture of David Bowie. And I was like, where did you meet David Bowie? And Coreen said something like, well, you know, you went out and, you know, you met people. I don't.
Partying that night at the China Club on the Upper West Side. And I was by myself with my camera, just having a drink at the China Club. And I looked over and I said, wait a minute, that's David Bowie sitting there. And, you know, took advantage of that situation. I did want to say the one thing that before I forget. The jewelry really supported my photography work. So I have to give credit to my jewelry business. I didn't have to work as a secretary anymore. It took off. My jewelry took off after I came out with the Cameo. So I was able to support. The primary goal in my life has always been the photography at that time. I wanted to support my photography, and I did get grants. I did get a few grants here and there, but once I started my jewelry business, I didn't have to ask for a grant anymore. So that allowed another artist to get that money because I was making the money. So that I have to give kudos to my clients, my jewelry clients, for supporting me all these years. I've had clients for the past 30 years, 35 years that bought my jewelry, and the money always would go back into my business as a photographer. If I needed equipment, I could go into my money, my earnings. So I want to give credit to my customers.
Well, also lucky them, but.
But you know, some people only know me as a jewelry designer. They didn't know I was a photographer. So it's like two worlds that I was involved in, and I never wanted them to intersect. I figured, let me keep the photography separate and the jewelry business separate, not to put them together. But now they're together, I guess.
I wanted to. My favorite small story in the book is the story about you meeting Muhammad Ali, which I think that, you know, hearing about, you know, you buying the coat and that kind of aha moment of getting access to, you know, certain people to photograph them. I wonder if you could speak a little more about that.
Well, that was just luck, pure luck. I went to Yankee Stadium because he was fighting Ken Norton. I forgot the year. And I didn't think I was going to meet Muhammad Ali or Ken Norton. I went to photograph people to see how they dressed going to the fights. I lived in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I thought that, you know what, that'll be a good story. Let me just stand outside the Yankee Stadium and take pictures of the fabulous people I thought that would be there. And there were lots of fabulous people. And I was taking pictures of them because I wanted to see what people wore when they came to these kind of heavyweight championship fights and so forth. And one gentleman said, would you like to meet Muhammad Ali? And I said, oh, well, sure. And then he said, follow me. And I was like, what? You know. And you know, I knew people coming in. They said, hey, Coreen. And I felt so bad. I said, I can't even go see the fight. Everybody was going in but me. I was on the outside looking in. And the guy said, would you like to meet him? So I followed him right around the corner. He was right a few doors from where I was standing. He was on a table with his masseuse. The guy was giving him a massage before he went to fight Ken Norton. And we started talking, and I had I worked for NBC at the time. I had my credentials, but I wasn't a photographer, but I had NBC credentials. So I showed it to him. I said, oh, I'm with NBC. So he said, oh, that's great. He said, you want to come with me to the ring? Do you know I walked behind him when he walked to the ring? And all my friends that were there, they were looking down. They said, Coreen, what are you doing? How did you get there? How did you get there? I said, don't even talk to me, honey. I was right with this Muhammad Ali. And then Don King, he removed me. But then after, because I didn't have a seat to sit front row. So the people that followed him, I wasn't the only one. There was some other press people walking him to the ring. And then they took us to a green room, and afterwards, Muhammad Ali said he invited me to come with him to a party. He introduced me to Veronica Porsche, and and everything. It was just a fabulous evening of photographs. And I was so nervous that I had this opportunity. I can tell you a mistake I made. I made a couple of mistakes as a photographer. I'll never forget this one, though. I was taking pictures, and the film was never getting ended. It wasn't ever ending. And I was click, 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 click. I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? I should be putting another roll in the camera. There was no roll in the camera. And so I missed several shots, but good thing I discovered it soon enough, and I've never made that mistake again. I figured out a way, because this is the time of film. We didn't have digital cameras we didn't. So I learned about film work. So I never made that mistake ever again, but I had enough photographs to make an article and get national publication from that.
That's great. Iesha, do you have either a story about the sequencing of the book or anything like that, or something you want to talk with Coreen about?
I think I want to hear about your story with Toni Morrison. I know that was an interesting one at the Studio Museum. Could you give a little intel about that moment?
I was assistant curator of photography under Reginald McGee, who headed the James Van Der Zee Institute. Remember the great photographer James Van Der Zee? So I worked with Mr. Van Der Zee. I used to go back and forth to his apartment for him to sign papers and all kinds of things. Had a nice relationship with him and his wife. But as assistant curator, when all the artists would come in, I told them that the museum wanted me to do a seated portrait of them. That was a lie, because they never asked me to do that. I said, I'm going to do it. So, but I used the museum because I was working for the museum, and no one ever questioned me. So one day Toni Morrison came in, and I told her, I have a studio set up. Would you sit there? And she did, and she was smoking her cigarette, and the portrait's in the book. I love this portrait of her. And she said, I don't think I should have a cigarette. I should be smoking. I said, no, you look so glamorous, because that's how she really was. She was, she smoked, and I wanted to have that image of her. And so she agreed to it. Do you know, I didn't find out till years later that we were born on the same day? February 18th is my birthday, and I was reading something about Toni Morrison, and she was born on February 18th too, not the same year. That would have been a good talking point, though. Because we would have hit it off if I really told her that. We were born on the same day. But anyway, she was great.
That's awesome. She actually was my professor in college.
Really,
So, yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Deep, very important in my evolution of my thinking about photography, in fact.
Wow.
So I think, first of all, I just want to pause one more time and say that if there is anyone here who has a question for Coreen, write it on a little card and wave your hand for Brianna, because I want to make sure, oh, great, I see one over here. So I just want to make sure we give time for that for 1 second. But maybe while we're getting that, I'll sort of ask my last question, second to last, which is kind of how do you want people, what do you want people to think and feel when they're holding this book? And Coreen, it's optional for you, but I would say for Adam and Michael and Iesha, if there's something you want people to take away from the experience or something you want to share, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to learn about Coreen Simpson, the artist, but also her as an entrepreneur, her as a hustler, making it as a woman in a very male-dominated industry and space. And also, importantly, to say that a woman of color during that time, like these were very difficult moments that she had to overcome and break through the glass ceiling. So I think that's huge takeaways from this book that relate to her wanting to document people that look like her and making them, greater than life.
That's great, Iesha. I want people to know Coreen's work. and Coreen's stories. And I also think, I think what you said before was so important about, you're an entrepreneur and an artist. And I feel like, you've always found ways to both, support yourself and make work, through the combination of jewelry and photography. And I love the first time I worked with Coreen was we did an article about her work in the magazine. And I remember you saying to me, well, I really think about jewelry design and photography as like, that's my practice. Like that those two things were bound up together in terms of what you do creatively. But I also think there's such a kind of, you're always taking, when you read these stories in the book, and even when you flip through the book and you see just the variety of work, you're always taking risks and trying new things, and like you're endlessly kind of rethinking your work too. And I think you really see that when in your collages, where Coreen has kind of reanimated work prints by cutting them apart, collaging them into these sort of surrealist compositions. That's like a whole other portal into your work. So to me, there's just this kind of spirit of endless creativity at work here, that you're always challenging yourself, always doing something new. And I think sometimes artists aren't rewarded for trying new things, but here there's also this sense of doing different things, but there's this sense of continuity at the same time.
Yeah, I think I was going to say something similar. I think, you can really see Coreen's life and artist's life and just how rich that can be, from starting out as a photographer, becoming a jewelry designer, being into fashion, being into art, being into partying, being downtown, going to church. That you can just see how rich a life can be as an artist, and you can really feel that on the pages in the publication.
All right, Coreen, this is going to be a rapid fire group.
Okay.
We've got some great questions from the audience. So I want to, we may not get to all of them, but I'm going to try. So one is, how do you come up with your creative concepts? When you're thinking of doing the B-Boy series, how do you come up with that?
Wow, that's a good question. I think it's just observing.
Were we speaking to the microphone? Sorry.
Observing. Sorry. I think it's just what I see in the street, and I'm always working on anything that interests me. I break it down into subject matter. Like if I'm going to church or something, I don't go to church a lot. Don't think I'm a big church goer, because I'm not. But when I do go, it's like an adventure, because I haven't been in a while or something. So I always bring my camera, because I see such great things. I love the church folks, I do. I love the ladies and how they dress. So anyway, I'd look through my roll of film and say, oh, I'll print that and put that in my church portfolio. And fashion goes in another thing. I love fashion, so I always put that there. And then it just develops. Now I'm working on something right now, but who knows how far I'm going to take it. And I'm not going to really talk about it, but it's something completely that I would not find very interesting ordinarily. But whatever interests me, I break it down in categories. Let's just put it that way. And that's how all these different segments of the book happens. So when Iesha would come, it wasn't that hard to find things, was it? Because it was broken down in folders or
you
in
can
boxes.
Be honest, Iesha.
Somewhat.
Yeah, anyway.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of the overall, one of the goals of the Vision and Justice endeavor are these recuperative histories. And it's like, I hope that at the end of all this, you feel like not only you have a book, but also that we've had the pleasure of working with your original prints, which are large and small, RC prints and fiber prints, color and black and white, and also with Jabrea Patterson West, and thinking, can we bring a little more research to structure this so that future generations can be studying it? All of these brilliant contributors to the book, each of their distinct perspectives. You know, I hope in the end you feel like you have a book plus all of these other ways of approaching your work. But that wasn't what I meant to say. What I meant to say was that there's a question from Accra who asked, were there any bodies of work that you return to after many years that you see or understand differently today?
I don't quite.
Well, in other words, some of these pictures you took many decades ago. And so did they mean something to you when you took them that now, through the process of working on this book, you're like, huh, I hadn't thought of the B-boys that way, or I hadn't thought of the fashion work that way? Or is it more a continuous evolution, which is also okay?
I don't know how to answer.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I got some other questions for you. So one of the, and maybe this is a good last question. This is from Jessica. Why do you think it took so long to get your incredible work published in a book?
Wow. I know.
Oh wait, maybe not. Oh, maybe some more.
You know, a friend of mine, I was talking to her the other day, and I wrote it down in my bag. But she said something, and I've heard this from a lot of church people. They say, what is this? He doesn't come he may not come when you call, but he's always on time. That's how I feel about this book. You know, because I had prayed for a book, basically, you know, when you're speaking to yourself, oh God, I wish I had a book of my work. But it didn't come when I wanted it to come. It comes in his time. So this is my time that I've been blessed with because it came from God's time to make the book happen. That's how I feel.
Amen. That's good. I mean, I would end on that, but there are some other great questions. So let's just keep going for just a tiny bit more. Okay, great. One is, and I think this touches on something that Michael was getting at. Do you think it's about being at the right place at the right time, or about being ready and or open to opportunities? Because you,
both, yeah.
Okay.
It's both. Yeah.
And how do you help make that happen? You know,
I just feel like,
were you talking to the microphone? Just
oh, I keep
For-
forgetting
I
about
know.
the microphone. This one?
Gave you two. They both are.
Okay. I think you have to prepare. I always prepare. Anytime I used to go on assignments, I'd come home the next day and write everything that I could have done to make it better. I did that when I went on trips. When I went to Africa with Jesse Jackson, he took me and several photographers to 8 African countries. And when I came home, I wrote in my book, you should do it this way next time, that way next time. So I would just improve. The more I work, the more I'm improving all the time. The same thing with the jewelry design, the same thing. I said, oh, I should have done that differently. So I kept notes. In fact, the Carnegie Museum just bought some of my work for their permanent collection. And they asked me questions that no other, oh, thank you. But they asked me questions that no other museum has asked me. And I said, what? They wanted to know what was the formulas and this, and I said, oh God, how am I gonna answer that? I haven't been in the darkroom in so many years, but I kept my darkroom notes. And I have a big darkroom book, and I found it on my shelf, and I opened it. It's like an old dear friend. And I photographed pages from the book about the film I was using, the notes I had taken, and the gallery that I'm working with in California, they said, oh, they're gonna love this, Coreen. And I sent you, Michael, I sent you some of those photographs. So that helped me keeping notes. So I've always kept notes.
That's great. That's great.
But when I'm working on something to be better next time.
Open and prepared, both.
Mhm.
So maybe this is another wonderful final question. what's your biggest piece of encouragement when you're afraid to put yourself out there? So I think this is sort of a question for maybe artists in the audience, or maybe anyone who's looking for a little courage. You know, you have put yourself out there consistently for a long time without the recognition of this book. Do you have words of encouragement or advice?
Well, I love Goethe's, the German philosopher said, I used to keep those words up on my wall. I photographed it and I couldn't find it lately. I wanted to bring it. But he said, whatever you think you can do, something to that effect. Whatever you think you can do, begin it. Begin it. Because that's magic. It's magical to just start to do something that you want to do. It has magic in it when you just say, I'm going to do something, dream about it, but then begin it. So that's good. And there was something else I was
allowed to
thinking.
drop the mic after that. But
Yeah.
well, I just want to say thank you so much to Parsons for hosting us tonight, this beautiful room. It's great to see so many people gathered here. Coreen, you are the best. We are so proud to have published this book.
And I just want to thank the Aperture Foundation, which all of you people are, all of you, Sarah Meister, who is the director, and my senior editor, Michael Famighetti, and all the people that worked with me on the book. I want to really give them my deepest thank yous because they really worked very hard.
They sure did, but I also know they loved every minute. So I'll say thank you to the talented teams. For those of you this is your first Aperture PhotoBook Club, we have all of our recordings online. So we'll put this one there, and we encourage you to check them out. And again, if you want to buy a book, there's a special discount code. Hold on. The discount code, and you'll get it if you're in the room tonight, is APBC Coreen. Those are 2 C's in a row. And you have to know how to spell Coreen correctly. I'm not going to do it for you. And also, thank you for agreeing to sign books tonight. That's really special. Appreciate it. So thanks for joining. Thank you, Parsons. And see you again next time.